You know, we were opening up Christmas presents, and I get this shoe-sized box, which I thought were a pair of sneakers, and I opened them up, and I was like, it's a Grand Seiko box, and I was still so shocked, and I'm like, what is this? And I couldn't believe it. I opened it up, and there it was, you know, the Peacock, and it was just like.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Derek from Credor & Co, and today I'm joined by my good friend and watch collector Ricky Wong. Today we're going to talk about his honest thoughts on the King Seiko SJE083, which I made a video on last week, and we're going to talk about his own journey in watch collecting. So Ricky, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and say what's up.
Thanks for having me here today, Derek. I'm really honored to be included in one of your videos, and I'm kind of humbled because I think I'm still a novice in watch collecting.
He's being super humble because he's definitely not a novice at this point, and it's likewise. I mean, I look up to you as a collector, as a friend, and I've seen what your collection's become over the years since you started, and I'm really impressed. And I know that you've been collecting some King Seiko, so that's why I want to hear what your thoughts are on the new King Seiko. I know you brought some of the stuff you have. Oh, what are you wearing on your wrist, by the way? Oh,
it's interesting that you brought up King Seiko. I'm actually, because of the video, and I'm wearing a vintage King Seiko 4502-8000. It's got a slate gray dial, raised indices, a date, and it's got the 4502A hand-wound high beat movement.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research on the 45 series, and I know that that's like you mentioned, that's the only high beat manual wind. You know, Seiko fans, don't kill me out there if I don't know every reference there, because I'm still learning about King Seiko. I know more modern stuff, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I read that it is the manual winding high beat version that King Seiko had produced. So that's pretty cool to see. And I like that gray dial on it too. It's super like matte finish, so it's easy to read. And it definitely has the design aesthetics that I think we'll see similarities in later on, you know, when I show you the King Seiko here too.
Yeah, I like this watch a lot because it's got this kind of neat cushion case. It's interesting that it actually, with the case design, it's actually a little bit bigger than I would think for a vintage design watch. Usually most of the older watches from the 60s and 70s were a lot smaller. Yeah. But for me, it's perfect, and I think it's great. What are you wearing today?
I'm wearing the Grand Seiko SJE083, or the Kiku. I think this is the second Grand Seiko I ever collected in my collection, and it became my most worn watch in like my whole collection in general. And I just love it. I love the design of it. I've always loved GMT models, and this is also my first GMT watch. And I decided to wear this one specifically, not just because it's my most worn watch, but because the dial of this one in 2018 when they launched this, they did the 20th anniversary of the 9S. And so they did a special mosaic-like texture. So it says, you know, GS for Grand Seiko. And then in the third slot, they have that little Daini Seikosha logo, which Daini Seikosha, with what we know as today, is what originated King Seiko. So I was like, oh, this is so fitting to kind of wear this for today, which I got lucky because I wanted to wear this anyways. So I just got to sneak that story in there. I forgot to ask, what size is that on your 45?
I believe it is a 39 millimeter. Don't quote me on that. Yeah. But it is pretty big for you know.
At the time, yeah, that's pretty big.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, my watch is a 39.5, and I think that's like the sweet spot now, like 38 to 40. Personally, for me, I'm sure other people have different size, you know, preferences, but 39, what? This is 1960s to 70s?
This is 1970 or, yeah, 1969, so yeah.
But still pretty big for that time.
Correct.
Because like other stuff was like, what, 36 to 38. That was the average then for a dress watch.
Right, yeah. So it's interesting to see that they, you know, design something so that wears a little bit larger, but again, for me, as a collector, I like the size, I like the case shape, and it wears really well, so.
Yeah, well, it looks great.
Thank you.
So how did you get into King Seiko?
Well, I actually have you to thank for getting me into Grand Seiko. You know, started collecting watches, and you know, you pointed me towards Seiko and Grand Seiko, and in researching the history of Grand Seiko and the pedigree of Grand Seiko, you know, started learning about King Seiko, and looking at the vintage watches, you know, got me more interested, and started looking at the different you know, King Seiko watches that were out there, and I actually brought a few with me today as well too to show off. Have another King Seiko 45-8000. Same case and movement as the one I'm wearing, but sans the date. And it's a white linen dial. It's beautiful, hand-wound movement. Again, love this cushion case. And so you can see the case back. It's got that old gold King Seiko logo on there in gold with the
That's solid gold too, the medallion?
I believe so. I'm not sure. I don't know for sure. Yeah. I've known people have pried this metal medallion off to sell off, because the gold content. I'm under the impression that it's at least 14 or 18 karat gold, but I don't know if it's like solid pure gold. But definitely there was value to that gold medallion.
Yeah, I've seen some. I did like light research on King Seiko. Can I take a look at that? And regarding the case back, I've seen that of course over time as people were wearing it, there is going to be like wear on the gold, like patina and other kinds of. Even I've seen scratches, dents. Like I don't know how people were messing up the back when it was on their wrist, but I'm sure that the combination of like sweat and the salt from your sweat and whatever affected that over time. So I hear like it's pretty rare to find one with like a pretty clean, unpolished one, because I think I've seen some polished ones where you can just tell it's like there's no way the case and that like survived what it should look like today.
That's correct. Again, when these were coming out, gold was still very highly valued, and to have one in good shape is generally something that to look for when you're looking at these vintage models as well too. Something interesting that I learned, and I could show you quickly, is that when with the logo on, generally if you have the serial number, the logo should be facing uprights towards you. If the medallion is facing any way other than upright with the serial number, that means it's either been something happened and it's been replaced or moved. And that's the same I've learned for Grand Seiko as well too. If you see the medallion doesn't line up with when you can read the serial number, then something's actually off with that particular medallion. It's either been replaced or something happened, it fell off and it got moved in replacement or something like that. So
that makes sense. But then I think like, why wouldn't whoever replaced it like put it on straight again?
I think some people just kind of took it for granted, seeing, hey, I got a replacement and I'm just going to pop it back on to make the watch whole again, not knowing that or if somebody pried it off and they just wanted to kind of restore the watch, not knowing something like that as well too. So it's an interesting little piece of information I picked up, and I've checked all my vintage pieces just to make sure. And yes, out of all the pieces, everything lines up. If something's off, and I've seen some online, then something's happened with the medallion along the way.
Yeah. So you said this is the 4500.
Correct.
Right? Yep. And then you're wearing the 4502.
Correct. The 02 denotes the date function. Okay. Yeah, the 4500 with no 02 means no date.
I'm an expert now. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, and it's interesting, researching these vintage ones too, I've kind of grown an appreciation for the no date function.
Yeah.
I used to think, and I still think, that watches are utilitarian. You have to be able to use it, and I always wanted a date function, but these days with cell phones and everything, you can always check the time or check the date. And I've grown to appreciate a no date on a watch. There's nice symmetry to it, just very clean lines, and that's why it's one of my favorite vintage King Seiko pieces. It's just a no date function. It's just lack of a date is very appealing to me now, and I look more for watches like that.
Yeah, I remember when we first met, like 2018, I think.
Correct.
Yeah, I remember you were like, if I'm gonna get a watch, it has to have a date on it. And now you're here. You can quote Ricky on this. He said, I don't care about dates anymore. So, things can change over time. And I agree with you. I think when I first started, and I think when people first start kind of collecting or getting into watches, you kind of think what's most practical for you. If you're gonna wear something on your wrist, of course you want it to aesthetically look nice. You want to like the brand or what they're doing. But then maybe you need a certain function on there that's actually practical. The date is like pretty much a no-brainer for most people who have to do things, because I check my watch for the date more than anything, not even the time now. And if I check the time, I'm just checking the minute, because I kind of know what the hour is. Like you mentioned, we have our phones. But I've been like getting more and more into no date watches as well. I think there's something so clean about the design, and I guess it kind of shows like what it's watchmaking, you know, and this is only like what, from the 70s or 60s, so that's like, what, no, I'm doing math wrong, 50 years ago?
Yeah, about 40, 50 years ago.
40, 50 years ago. So, I mean, the taste has not changed too much. I mean, like, we see more modern versions of this stuff now, but, you know, they had the most pure expression of time, like just clean dial, beautiful design, you know, no date. And then I guess when they made the 4502, they started incorporating a little bit more functionality. And then probably we see that evolve into time today.
Yeah, and even the watches, you know, that, you know, are even older than that, you know, so you're thinking things that are pre, you know, 1960s, 1950s, most of them didn't have a date complication, and that's what a date function was an added complication.
That's true.
Yeah, and so when I'm looking at, you know, older Seikos, you know, pre-Grand Seiko, pre-King Seiko, you know, you find mostly just, you know, time-only watches, and they're beautiful. The symmetry is really nice, and, you know, I can appreciate just thinking back then. It's like, yes, you know, the date was important to know in the day, but, you know, time was much more important for somebody to be able to tell time. So
that's true. Yeah. What else did you bring here?
So I brought some really fun pieces, and these are ones that I really love. More vintage Grand Seikos, but these are, oh, sorry, vintage King Seikos, but these are from the Vanac line. These are like early to mid 1970s. Seiko wanted to appeal to younger, you know, buyers and retail customers, so they came out with these really funky angular case designs, you know, faceted crystals, you know, super bright, you know,
so
colors,
cool.
Just very, very indicative of the 1970s and you know, kind of like disco era and everything. And they, again, younger buyers that they were trying to attract. And you know, these were automatic movements. The one that you're holding in your hand is the 5626 7190, and the one I have here with the orange dial is the 5626 723B. You know, with the super bright orange, and it's, you know, they're fun. The one thing I love about these Vanacs is that they had solid bracelet designs, and some of the bracelets that, you know, King Seiko and Seiko came up with these are, you know, great. I would say they rivaled some of the bracelets that are out now, in my personal opinion. But you know, I have like over a dozen of these different ones. There are many different designs, and they're just really, really fun to, you know, to wear around. And I especially like wearing them in the summertime because of all the different colors.
These are so cool. I saw the ad. It's really funny because there's like a guy wearing a sailor's hat, and he's like rocking this watch, and you know, even at that era, it looks really cool because it's like faceted crystal, different colors. But I think if I saw someone wearing this today, I would think it's still pretty cool too. I mean, it's really unique that, I mean, the crystal on here, it's not like you know, today we see a lot of box-shaped crystal, cushion-shaped crystal, but most things are just like round and flat. So this thing is like actually faceted on different angles. I'm sure like if you lost this crystal, you had to replace it, that's like a little bit of a pain because, you know, it's probably not produced, and I don't know who produces these anymore. So I'm sure that would have been a little, you know, hard to replace that in the after service area. But I mean, the dials here are just so nice. So this is the blue dial version, has a day date function. So again, like taking, you know, the complication of the date, expanding it to the day date. Does this read English too, along with kanji? So
English and in Japanese as well too. So you can set it and it'll be in English, or you can set it and it'll be, you know, in Japanese as well too. So it's your preference at the time. That's another added feature that I like about these. As well too, and you're right about the crystals. It's really tough now to these days to find the vintage crystals intact. These were made, you know, mineral crystals. Yeah. And so the ones that you do come across, usually they have some type of, you know, unfortunate scratching or scarring to them. Yeah. Luckily, these two examples I have are, you know, great, and I try to be, you know, extra really careful. Clean. Yeah, wearing them. My understanding is that, you know, when Seiko produces a watch, they generally, you know, stock parts for up to 30 plus years, but these are like, you know, over 40 something years old. So it's very tough to find, you know, replacements. I have sourced some replacement crystals just to keep around just in case,
smart
because, you know, one of the things about my watches, as much as they are vintage and they are collectible, I have to be able to utilize them and wear them. So I do wear these, and you know, on the off chance that I end up, you know, dinging something or scratching it or anything like that, I know later on I can, you know, easily replace it.
Yeah. Do these have lume on them too?
So the one you're holding actually has lume on it, and the lume still works,
Okay.
which is, you know, which is great. This one that I'm holding doesn't have any lume on it, but most of the Vanacs that I had some sort of lume on them. What I like about these Vanacs too is that they have the really raised, chunky indices. It's just, you know, I think it was basically to help to read the watch better, but that's just my own kind of thoughts, because as cool as the faceted crystals look, sometimes it makes it hard to read the watch a little bit.
Okay.
It's just, there's like a lot of distortion.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of stylistic kind of designs to it without, you know, kind of they forgo the function part of it. But overall, it's still, you know, easily legible in certain respects. But I think they wanted to make sure that somebody could actually see and be able to tell the time through all those facets.
Yeah, I see that on the blue one I'm holding. They used like, you know, they use a blue dial, and then they have like gold colored indices. So do most of them have like different color indices to kind of differentiate like legibility?
I think it's a possibility. This one is an orange dial, but it also has these kind of gold ones. So there's a little bit of blending in there, and you know, I guess to a person who doesn't, you know, to take a quick glance, they may have to take a, you know, a second glance just to be able to read the time. But yeah, I have you know, King Seiko Vanacs that have like jeweled indices, like they're green colored jewels or something in there that, some kind of crystal that they used in there, and it makes it really kind of stand out. Other ones are just a little bit more subtle, and they kind of let the dial do the talking a little bit more. There's, you know, obviously a lot of folks know who are into Grand Seiko and King Seiko that they're really, you know, next level on their dial work, and it's, you know, no different with the vintage watches. They just really kind of put a lot of attention to the dial work.
Yeah, this case is actually really cool too. Like, it's not like usual cases. Usual cases are, you know, you have a little gap between where the lugs would go, and then you would have like a straight kind of spring bar. But this one, it's like, you know, the case is, it overlaps here a lot, and then you get the lugs pretty much under this like little, you know, metal, like, I wouldn't say flap, but like, you know, part of the case. So the bracelet like can drop down straight, which is really nice. I'm sure it wears really well on the wrist. Are these like 36 millimeter or?
Yeah, they're about like 37, 36 millimeters, depending. Some of them are can be up to about, you know, 38. I don't think anything beyond that. It's interesting you mentioned the angular case-shaped designs. For me, this particular model, this 56-26-7 B190, the case reminds me of the current Lion's Mane Grand Seiko that came out. Obviously that watch is much larger and bigger, but when I look at it, I was like, wow, I see like inspiration. So I know, you know, Seiko overall itself, you know, values its history, which is great. So they probably harken back to some previous designs and kind of looked at it. I see that inspiration in this, you know, particular model. That's why I kind of brought it, you know.
It's funny you bring up like Seiko's kind of philosophy, and I guess Grand Seiko now, since Grand Seiko is getting, like, I would say really well known now. Like, more people who are just getting into watches are choosing Grand Seiko as their first watch. They're hearing about it, not just in like people who talk about watches, but you see it in popular media. Like, you'll see it on Forbes, or you'll see it at, like, on a Hypebeast, you know, article or link that Grand Seiko's out there now. So my question to you, since you kind of brought it up, is like, what makes you choose, you know, you can collect anything in any watch brand. You can collect Swiss, German, whatever, but why do you focus your collection, you know, around Seiko, Grand Seiko?
I've always had an affinity for all things Japanese. I love like the history, both you know, ancient and modern customs, you know, current pop culture and everything. I love Japanese food. That's, you know, probably one of my favorite things. And it was just kind of natural. And again, have you to thank. I just never looked at it, you know, like, I think like everybody else when you first started, you're looking more at Swiss brands. Yeah. And the more I kind of looked into Grand Seiko, and, you know, I saw the depth of quality, the attention to detail that just the Japanese are known for in everything that they do,
Yeah.
and they kind of stand behind their work, and learning, that their work ethic, it's like one person takes a job at something they do and they just take it and make it their own and excel at it, and they generally work that entire job for their career. The kind of dedication, it speaks to me, as a brand. So it just kind of naturally kind of gravitated towards it, and now, starting, was it 2017 or 18, I bought my first Grand Seiko from you, and now I have like dozens in my collection, just learning about it.
Dozens with the S, plural.
Thanks to you.
Yeah. I'm like, I have like 3. Like I love my Grand Seikos. I have some vintage Seikos, thanks to you too. And I don't know if you feel this way, and if I'm projecting and you're reading it wrong, then you can let me know. But I guess like also for me, like why things I like about Seiko, Grand Seiko, and I just want to say this video is not sponsored by any way by any of these brands. We just Ricky and I just kind of got together. We wanted to shoot something, so just for fun. So I don't want anyone being like, he's just saying that because whatever. Anyways, I've always liked that Grand Seiko feels like an underdog in the whole watch industry, because in the watch industry, like you mentioned, the big names are in the Swiss, they're in the German, and then there's Grand Seiko. Often they're small country, small island, and for them to be excelling at what they're doing it really well in their own country in Japan, but then now like other parts of the world are starting to appreciate. Like I know there's a huge following here in the States. I know there's a huge following in Australia. I know there's a huge following, building in Europe and other countries. So it's like, what was, of course, each watch brand comes from a small manufacturer. It's now reaching a lot of people, and people are seeing the value in what Grand Seiko is bringing, their original designs. They're not trying to be like the Swiss. Maybe early inspiration, there's, I can't deny early inspiration, there's probably some overlap there, but now they've really developed their own style, their own design, their own movements. I mean, I can go on talking about that, but I guess like for me, what I like as an underdog, also the fact that it's Japanese, it is an Asian watch brand, and being Chinese myself, like I identify with something that people respect for its quality and work, and it's not like me trying to bring ethnicity or race or anything into it, but it's something that's just in the back of my head. I don't think about that in the forefront, but like it makes me kind of proud. Like this is like this is from Asian people, like Japanese specifically, but and like you said, their culture, their work ethic. I mean, going to Japan, like you walk down the street and everything has a form and function. Like everything is so nicely designed into their culture and into their day-to-day lives, and I love it. It's awesome.
No, I completely agree. Seiko has been around for years, and I think a lot of not like anybody who's buying their first watch, or even a novice watch collector who's just getting started out, I feel somewhere along the way they picked up a Seiko, but then they didn't kind of give it any a mind later on when if somebody got more serious about collecting watches. There was more focus on Swiss brands or other brands, and I think for a while Grand Seiko was very much under the radar, but I now feel that they're much more in the mainstream. And as a collector, and again, somebody who's also proud of their Asian heritage, it's nice to see. I have an affinity for the brand too, because the Asian background as well too. I would be lying if I was saying that didn't kind of play into it, but it's great to kind of see. An interesting story, my younger brother, who's in the finance world, a lot of people wear very nice watches, mostly Swiss brands. He was in
like Rolex and
correct, Rolex, Patek, AP, or something like that, and he was actually down in Texas last week, first time business meeting after the pandemic. And he was around, obviously, his clients and everything, and most of them were like, some form of like, interest in watches, some more serious than others. And they knew my brother was also a watch collector, and they were talking to him, and the topic of Grand Seiko just kept coming up. They were remarking about the snowflake dial, and how the level of workmanship is great, and it's nice to hear that the Grand Seiko is being recognized in the mainstream.
Yeah.
But for a collector like me, it's part of my daily routine to be able to kind of talk through this. And I haven't convinced my brother yet to get into Grand Seiko. He's still stuck in that Swiss mindset, which is fine. There's you're a collector, you're your own person, and you kind of figure things out. But I see him kind of talking it, and I've gotten into his vocabulary a little bit as well too. So.
I think you told me one time you went to an omakase restaurant and the chef is a Grand Seiko collector, and he saw it, right? Or
that's right. We went to Nakazawa's. And for folks who don't know, he apprenticed with Jiro in Japan. This is Jiro Dreams of Sushi, the documentary that's available, I think, on Netflix. He kind of, after that documentary, he kind of spun off and opened up his own Japanese restaurant, omakase style, in the United States. And it was my wife and I went there for our first, omakase just to try it out. And the receptionist noticed, oh, you're wearing a Grand Seiko, right away. Just saw it on my wrist, and I was like, oh yes. Reception person was Japanese, and he was like, "Oh, Chef Nakazawa is, I don't know if he's an official brand ambassador, but it's known that he's has an affinity for Grand Seiko, and I think he wears a diver's Grand Seiko model." So it was nice, to be able to do that, I have yet to actually spot somebody that I don't know wearing a Grand Seiko out in the wild. When I'm on the subway or walking around, I still see a lot of Swiss brands, but I'm always looking out to see if there's potentially a Grand Seiko. I think the only time I saw somebody with something Grand Seiko was I was waiting for a food order in Chinatown, and there was a gentleman wearing a Grand Seiko cap.
Really?
Yeah, and at first I was like, is this somebody's dad or grandpa that somebody passed a Grand Seiko cap to? But it was actually, not. And
you're talking about the baseball cap?
Baseball cap, yeah. And I was like, no, I think this person might be an aficionado, but they weren't wearing a Grand Seiko watch.
How dare they?
So, but that's the only time I've kind of spotted that in a while.
That's really funny. I guess I'm lucky because, in our shop, I do get to meet a lot of people I don't know beforehand who wear Grand Seiko. But it's true, when I'm out in the wild, of course, as watch people, we don't do this intentionally, but I guess if you collect shoes and pens and all this stuff, you would also spot this kind of stuff. But when you're naturally talking to someone, you might just glance down at their wrist really quick, just see what they're wearing. But I have yet to see Grand Seiko out there. But I know that there's a lot of people out there wearing Grand Seiko now. And it's pretty cool. Oh, which Grand Seiko were you wearing at Nakazawa's?
I believe I was wearing the SJE083, the Peacock.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a special memory that Derek and I share with that. My wife for Christmas, I think of 2018, plotted and schemed with Derek to surprise me. I came late again to Grand Seiko, and the Peacock was basically had done its rotation already, and I thought, sold out in the regular market. I was very much interested in it. Asked Derek to see if he could help me source one, and Derek's like, yeah, there's probably one or two available. I'll have to check with Grand Seiko USA to see. Hold off on trying to source it yourself. Let me see what I can do. And I was asking Derek on almost a weekly basis. And Christmas came around, and we were opening up Christmas presents, and I get this shoe-sized box, which I thought were a pair of sneakers, and I opened them up, and I was like, it's a Grand Seiko box, and I was still so shocked, and I'm like, what is this? And I couldn't believe it. I opened it up, and there it was, the Peacock, and it was just like, I worked with Derek to get this for you. So best gift ever. Obviously, that watch is going to stay in my collection, for good because of the significance, being a Christmas gift for my wife. But you guys really, pulled one over on me. I was not expecting it whatsoever. So it was a really, really nice surprise.
Yeah, I love the Peacock. I think that was one of the first Grand Seiko limited editions I had seen, outside of I don't even remember what they had that year, but. I remember I was looking at the Snowflake a lot that year. I think that's a starter Grand Seiko that a lot of people kind of know about or hear about. It's their flagship piece. And then when I saw the Peacock, I was like, this dial is so incredible. And then you have that gold GMT hand, and then I believe the rest is all silver indices, like silver colored indices. And the contrast was so nice. I was like, wow. I used to, you know, when we had it in stock, I was like, I would always stare at it like, maybe I should get one, maybe I should get one. You know, it's a really hot piece, you know, now, like I see over outside of the, you know, what is it called? On the market, it's like over retail. It's, you know, a lot of the limited editions, they're harder to get now. More people are knowing about them, and I did not buy Ricky the watch. Just want to say that, so I don't want anyone asking me like, when is Derek gonna buy me a watch? But you know, yeah, Anna, she coordinated that, and I was just happy to be part of that, and I'm happy it's in your collection. I love stories like that. It's just like there's I guess like in collecting, there's like a whole like realm of things. It's like research to chasing the watch to actually getting it and then actually owning it, and like, you know, I'm happy to be part of like that full circle there, where you have it now.
You have my thanks, and yeah, now there's special meaning to the watch. Like you know, watches, I feel like, you know, collecting in the hobby, you know, watches will come and go. This is one that's going to stay in my collection. You know, even talk to my brother. It's like, you know, this is like a piece that we'll probably hand down in the family because there's, you know, sentimental significance to it. You know, which is great. I still think it's one of the best styles that Grand Seiko
I think so too.
Came out with, and I think if it's not the first, it may be one of the first like batch where when Grand Seiko went solo and, you know, switched from the double logo to its, you know, exclusively just a Grand Seiko. I think it was one of the first models to have that. Yeah.
Yeah. Ah, I love that. I gotta show you the King Seiko here, because this is the first time you're getting to see this on camera.
I'm ready.
So I'm just gonna show you. You saw the video I did last week.
Right. So. I've seen pictures online, but I haven't seen this in person. And just this is my first time seeing it. It's like, wow. One, the box is amazing. I love, you know, this is
Ricky's honest opinions on the watch. So, you know, he's gonna give his own review. Yeah. I just tricked Ricky to get on camera so I could force him to buy it in front of me right now. So
this box is really nice. Has that new car smell to it, but this is new watch smell. So I'm gonna take this watch out, but it's beautiful. I've never handled the vintage version 44 King Seiko, but size looks great. I love these faceted lugs. I like the long lugs as well too. Beautiful sunburst dial, nice, you know, raised indices all around.
From what, you know, I've heard about this watch, research about the watch, it is pretty much a recreation of, I think, the 44-9990. I think it's the second King Seiko, and this is the first one that really adhered to the Taro Tanaka grammar of design, which is what people know as today in Grand Seiko's grammar of design. There's like 4, or I forgot how many, like, what's it called? 4 rules to his grammar of design. It's like all surfaces must be perfectly flat, distortion free is another one. They all have to have, you know, the case has to have dual facets, so it has to be, you know, has to have multiple angles. And then I forgot the last one, probably something along with something with the double logo at 12 o'clock too. But I mean, try it on. Like, I think this watch fits really well on the wrist, and my wrist is like 6.5. I think your wrist is probably similar size. They definitely took a lot of that inspiration, like the vintage style, and then they made it more modern. The polishing, I think, is really crazy on this piece. I know Seiko's been increasing their prices, especially when it comes to like recreation pieces. They want to go up market. I think their polishing at like $3,000 is still like, there's still really no competition in $3,000 with this level of polishing, and I can safely say that.
Well, just looking at it right now, my first impression is that they did a great job. Looks great, proportions are really nice. Yeah, the polish on this is insane, just seeing it. I love the box crystals. I just haven't, like, you know, this really harkens back to the vintage era when they had, you know, box crystals, but this obviously is sapphire, which is, you know, way more durable. Love the Seiko logo buckle from yesteryear, which is great. That, you know, they brought back obviously the gold shield logo, which is fantastic. So I think the 449999 was the kind of like precursor, and then it evolved into the 44-9990, and then they switched from the Shield logo to the Seiko logo in the back, but still with the gold medallion.
Is that this one now, like the Seiko KS?
Yeah, well, it wouldn't say KS. I think it just said Seiko,
Oh,
and I think it had, if I recall, some had the Daini, some didn't have the Daini on it, but it was a little bit more plain and subdued. This is the logo that I think for vintage collectors, my personal recommendation to kind of have. Yeah, which is really cool because that's what King Seiko is kind of based on. I know the original one too was a 25 jewel. I think this one is a 26 jewel.
Yeah, 50 years, one more jewel. I'm just kidding. I like the name King Seiko. I think it sounds so royal. Like it does sound, it could sound like it is a top level brand. Because at the time, I think King Seiko was supposed to be a brand just underneath Grand Seiko. Grand Seiko was supposed to be like the top peak high level for Seiko watches. But I think today we know that as Credor. Like that's really their top level. But Grand Seiko still has stuff that's in that masterpiece collection that are same price and similar micro artist studio manufactured. But King Seiko, just the name itself I think it sounds nice.
Yeah. I mean, I applaud Seiko for kind of splitting their two factories into Seiko and Grand Seiko and King Seiko to basically encourage internal competition to basically develop the best product, and it's just a kind of a bold move. I've heard funny stories about how there's still like older King Seiko and Grand Seiko staff still around, and there's a mutual respect. Yeah. But generally, the competition, the feeling of competition is still there. Yeah. So it's kind of like funny to hear that. I don't know how true that is, but
I'm sure that's true because I think in the new High Beat Seasons collection and the Spring Drive Seasons collection, which is SBGJ 251, SBGJ 249, and then the new SBGE, I don't remember the numbers, but the new 4 seasons, Shunbun, Taisetsu, Shubun, and then the last one is, I forgot. Anyways, those two models are Spring Drive, which is made in what is now known as Seiko Epson, which was Suwa Seiko Sha. Right. And then the other two are made in Grand Seiko's Shizuku Eichi Watch Studio, which I'm sure is Daini Seiko Sha's, inspiration from their High Beat and Mechanical, now Quartz and Spring Drive in the other factory. And so I believe that even the way they did two similar watches, each from, two from Spring Drive, two from High Beat, the watches are still done a little bit differently in each way. I think I'll touch upon that in a future video if I get to review all 4. So, but yeah, I definitely agree that there's still like that little internal competition.
Which I think is good, everybody works together, there's mutual respect, but I think they're kind of pushing one another to, to really push and get out a really, excellent product, and if that's able to, encourage that, I think we're going to continue to see great things from Seiko and Grand Seiko. Yeah. And I'm hoping, more, more pieces coming back from King Seiko.
So what is your final thoughts on this King Seiko recreation?
It's beautiful, and anybody considering it, I think they should definitely get it. I'm probably going to add that to my collection. Your influence is unhealthy on my wallet, but my collection thanks you for that.
My influence is also unhealthy on my own wallet, so I have only myself to blame. But like, look at the lugs here. Something I really like is it is supposed to be like the fat lug style, but then just the way they did the bifaceted, like if it catches some shadow, it actually looks so much slimmer, right? And then when you tilt it, you can actually really see the play of light.
It disappears, and actually, it's when I was looking at the vintage models, I always had to do a double take to make sure that I was actually looking at the correct vintage models. It was like, why does the lug look so slim? But it was because of the camera angle and the lighting that they weren't catching the other facet. But then when you look at it at other angles, like, oh, there it is, and that's that's how I know. So. Yeah.
So we're about to just like wrap up now. Ricky saw the King Seiko. He gave us his cool thoughts on it compared to some of the, the historical King Seikos that he has. And I guess like for anyone who's getting into watch collecting, like your final thoughts, like what are your like comments on people who are getting into collecting? Like what are some things you learned that you would pass on to someone if they want to collect? watches? It doesn't have to be just Seiko or Grand Seiko. But.
Yeah, and I think just in any hobby, whatever you get into, there's a lot of information out there. Make sure you do your research. I think there's no cookie cutter way of collecting,
sure.
Especially with watches. I think you'll find a groove of buy what you like. That's the most important thing. And every watch that I bought, I like it. Not only do I like it, for me personally, it has to be functional because it is a watch. I'm going to wear it. I personally don't want to have like a box queen or safe queen, they call it, and it's just something that sits in the box and not utilized whatsoever. I like wearing my watches and using them. But again, everybody's a little bit different. If you want to buy something, you just keep it in the safe for investment. That's entirely up to you. But if you buy what you like, I think you're going to get a lot of enjoyment. Make sure you do the research. There are a lot of online resources. One being like online forums. There's a Facebook group that I'm part of that I'm very active. It's the Grand Seiko's Owners Club.
I remember when that was like 5,000 members or something.
Yeah, now I think they're over 20,000.
They're like over 20,000.
Yeah, which is like fantastic. There's great people on there, and from novice to experts, and you can ask questions. But there are other online resources, a lot of the articles that on vintage and also on modern. Seiko, Grand Seiko, King Seiko, and same with other watch brands as well too. I'll be honest, talking here, I feel my collection is very, very Seiko heavy, and I've started to branch out into researching other brands, but I still continually look at Seiko and Grand Seiko as a go-to because they surprise me with interesting things from the past, and I learn about it, and it's great. New pieces that come out every time, something like this, which I was like, oh, I want to see how this compares to the vintage. But this, I think they did a really great job. So that's my advice, and that's in collecting anything. So
cool. I do have I think one more question now. So that was great advice. What is your Grail watch? Real quick, if you could give us what is the watch. Doesn't have to be your hunting now or whatever. I'm sure our answers change as we collect, but what is your current Grail watch?
Well, I used to and love the IWC Portugieser Perpetual. I still think
that's a great Perpetual calendar.
It's a beautiful watch. What kind of changed my mind a little bit was that it's a fairly big watch, very thick, very big on the wrist, and I have smaller wrists, and I love the IWC brand, but I've kind of moved on from that as being the penultimate watch for myself, and being into Seiko and Grand Seiko and King Seiko so much, I think it's almost a tie. I would love one day to either have a Credor Eichi 2, right? Or if we were going vintage, probably the Seiko, the Astronomical Observatory Chronometer. That's the AOC, aka that's the one that the Seiko submitted to the time trials and the Swiss Neuchâtel Observatory. And they did great. And those pieces that they actually submitted, then Seiko released them out for sale to the general public. I think in total 226 pieces overall. But just to have something historical like that really showed the overall world watch market, what Japanese timekeeping can do. That's for me the ultimate Grail watch to have. And they don't come up often, so.
If anyone knows where you can get a Seiko AOC, I'm not talking about Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, I'm talking about the Astronomical Observatory Chronometer. Leave a comment below so you can help Ricky out, because this is what he's hunting for right now. But hey man, thanks again so much for coming on. It's been such a pleasure. I always love chatting with you, even outside of watches and stuff, but yeah, it's been an honor. Thanks so much for coming on, Ricky.
Oh no, thank you, Derek. It's so much fun. Again, we always have so much fun talking about watches, and this was really great. I'm honored again to be part of your video series. Still learning here, folks. So please don't quote me on everything that information I share here. But always happy to come and speak to you about watches.
Awesome.